Hi everybody, good evening and welcome to webinar 38. We are going to talk about essay writing. We have a guest speaker, Dr Maggie Jackson, and each of the team are going to take a short segment. So while you're all getting into the room, please be assured we can't see you, we can't hear you, all mics and cameras are off. Hopefully everything is set up correctly and you can see us. And if you can, that'd be absolutely fantastic. Please use the chat to talk to us. I can see that Dave's put a comment in about making sure your chat is sent to all attendees and panelists. That's fantastic. So please do tell us where in the world you are. What area of social work are you practicing, or what university are you at, what year are you in, what your role is, and what country you are in. So welcome everybody, webinar 38. And we've just gone up to 200 people, which is fantastic. And I would like to ask you today, it might sound a bit of a strange question, but if you've been here before, you'll know that there aren't any strange questions. What's your favourite type of bread? Now, I know there's a rumour that I ask everybody what they've had for the tea, which is absolutely false. That's not what I do. But tell us, what is your favourite type of bread?
Yes, thank you, Kelly, for opening up for us, as you always do. And the numbers are still going up all of the time. So we're up to 286 at the moment. But we are going to make a start because there is so much for us to get through. We know that normally we need to leave a bit of time at the start just to make sure everybody can get in. And the tech team, who include Kelly, Chris and Kat, the tech team we'll be working through making sure everybody's getting in smoothly, and we're just about to go over 300 now, I think. So numbers are still rising, but we are going to make a start. Now, tonight we're going to be looking at essay writing. It is webinar number 38 for those of you who have been to, I know some people have been to literally every webinar that we have done, but this is webinar number 38. We know that our back to basics webinars are always the most popular, and so we usually get the higher numbers in these sessions. Tonight we're going to be looking at essay writing, and what we've decided to do is, as a team, we sat and we worked through thinking about essay writing. Interestingly, on our Twitter page earlier, we put a poll on to see what your thoughts were about essay writing, and we asked, what's the biggest challenge that you face when writing essays? We got 37% of people said the writing style required, 24% said referencing, 18% said keeping to the word count, and 21% said something else. We might start to put in the chat what the something else's were. But those kinds of concerns are the concerns that the team shared. In fact, the idea for this webinar came out of the fact that in our team WhatsApp group, there were so many messages about writing essays and people giving each other advice about essays. And I said, look, we should do a webinar on this because the advice you're giving each other is really good. So tonight's webinar is actually being led by the team. Each member of the team has taken an aspect around assignment writing that they are going to share with you. And really, the reason that we opened with what kind of bread do you like is because essays, assignments, tasks, whatever you want to call them, and different universities call them different things, are the bread and butter of social work training. You've got to get into them. You've got to be able to do them. And so having advice, I think, from one another about, well, how did you improve this? How did you improve that? Can be really helpful. So use the chat tonight to ask the Connect team. We've got a fabulous group of students and newly qualified workers that work the team for these webinars. Ask the team for their advice, and the team will be in the chat with you all of the time and answering the questions in the Q&A. And what we're going to try and do is give you our top tips for assignment writing. So it's going to be the whole team. Unfortunately, missing Diana tonight because Diana is at a function for her placement. So I'm going to do a little bit that Diana would have done, but all of the rest of the team are here and they're all going to present something and give you their top tips. But the way I see it is we can give you the recipe. We can even give you some of the ingredients. That's what we're going to try and do in the session tonight. But our top tips, even the recipe, even if we give you some of the ingredients, you've got to make the dough and bake the bread yourself. That's the important thing. So this is bread and butter stuff, but you've got to make the bread for yourself. And as we've already picked up in the chat, everybody likes different kinds of bread. So the tips that you will need and the tips that you will find the most helpful will differ throughout the night. But one thing that we know from the team and from what goes on in the WhatsApp group, I would tell you it's a fascinating WhatsApp group for me as a practice educator to be in, with all of the chat that goes on between the group. Is the key thing that I think connects everybody is what we have called procrastination vacation. This is actually a kind of an adaptation from something that somebody did post into the WhatsApp group, exactly, and we kind of adapted it, and I've been adding in little bits of, I hope the team can all see themselves actually in here, because the things that the team do are all on this procrastination vacation. And I wonder whether some of you in the audience listening in, whether you can recognize yourselves, whether you take a vacation in the Procrastination Island when you are looking at trying to get your assignment done. So we've got some people are out there surfing social media instead of the task at hand. There's a wilderness of ideas here. There's a lake of reflection that people stand and look in for a long time. There's a bit of rabbit hole thinking going on the island. People get themselves stuck and end up going right down a rabbit hole. There's a whole forest of reading that sometimes then takes you off in different directions. The city of the sudden need to clean and organize. That is one I experience, if I'm honest. I do that a lot. I'm like, oh, I must clean the fridge out before I can possibly write this. Even if it doesn't really matter, I've really got to do it at that moment in time. We've got a beach of snacks. Some of the team will send photos in the WhatsApp group of the snacks they are enjoying. I wondered whether we should even try and get the webinar actually sponsored by some of the snacks company. There's that many of snacks being eaten by some team members. I don't know. And there's also, on that beach of snacks, there's also a bit of gaming going on as well. I think some gaming that's happening there. There is the daydream boat that could take you right out to sea, you know, on the waves. You could end up a long way out. And there's also the I'll get it done, little mini island part. So I don't know if that's a bit of fun to start off tonight's webinar, but we do feel that there is a lot of procrastination that goes on when writing essays. But when you listen to the tips, actually, as they pan out, what I think is really interesting is that not all procrastination is problematic. Actually, some can be very helpful. And that's what I think you'll pick up from the tips that team members are going to share with you. But before we start those hints and tips, I just want to remind you that tonight we're going to be looking at essays and assignments more than reflective writing, although there'll be aspects of reflection that will come into tonight. We did do a whole webinar on reflective writing, and you can watch that back on YouTube. I think the team will put the link into the chat at the moment if that's something that you want to do. The other thing that I would say to you is, as you listen to each hint and tip, don't then think, oh, well, I've got what I need. I'm going to go just before the summary. You know that we do a summary at the end, and that we tell you what's coming up next week and the next few weeks, because at the very end tonight, we've got a huge announcement that we're really excited about and we want to share with you. And you will be the first to know, those of you who are attending live tonight. So please do stay around until the end tonight. You've got a lot of, well, there's a lot I've learned from the slides and talking to the team about tonight. So I think there'll be a lot of learning for everybody involved. So I'm going to need to start off, because Diana couldn't be with us, and I'm going to start off with the point of, really, although it sounds very basic, the most important thing that you can do in essay writing is understand the question. If you don't understand the question, you're not going to be able to answer the question. So make sure that you read it in detail. Questions generally come with quite a lot of guidance, and very often something about the learning outcomes or what's being looked for. And if I'm honest with you, I want to be completely honest here as someone who's, you know, I'm not a student, I'm a practice educator. I've marked a lot of assignments. I've worked as a university lecturer. I think that sometimes people don't understand the assignment because they've not been going to the module lectures. If you go to the module lectures, you're much more likely to be able to understand the question and to know what needs to come in the assignment. But if you genuinely don't understand the assignment question, then ask the person who set the assignment. I wouldn't say to somebody, I don't know what to do. I would say, this is what I'm thinking. Have I got it right? Rather than just, I don't understand it. Go and say, this is how I understand it. Is that right? I think that would be a better way to approach that. But this week we had somebody message us with, I've had this question, how do I answer it? So I wouldn't give that kind of help because that's not my role, it's not our role. But I did think, okay, well, we'll use it tonight as an example. So we had this sent in to us as, this is the question I've got to answer, how do I do it? And it says, how has your understanding of personal and professional values and ethics changed? Using examples that you feel are compatible with professional values and others that may give rise to a certain level of tension, how will you manage any potential conflicts? Now, that was exactly as it was sent to us. It may not be exactly as the assignment was written. It may not have the same punctuation, but that's exactly as it was sent to us. And what I would say is, you know, I'm a lover of highlighter pens. I talk about the use of highlighter pens a lot, and I think Kat's probably going to talk about that later as well. But I'm a lover of highlighter pens. So I would actually highlight the question so that I'm clear on what is this question looking for. So from my perspective, I think the key things in this question are, how has your understanding changed? That's what we're looking for. How has your understanding changed? So you've got to show some change, some development, something is now different. And the key thing that you're looking at around your understanding changing is personal and professional values and ethics. So there's one starting point. Make sure that you understand what personal and professional values and ethics are. Go and do some reading around it. Take a good look at that area. And then using examples, how might you manage any potential conflicts? So jot down some examples and think about conflicts that might occur, and then think about, how would I handle those? So you're breaking this down into parts and you're doing different bits on different days. So one day you're going to look at the pink. Today I'm going to explore personal and professional values and ethics. And then on another day, I'm going to think about examples and how I might manage those conflicts. And then it's key here is that you're looking for some that you feel are compatible with professional values and some that might conflict with professional values, some that might cause a level of tension. So in your examples, where are your personal and professional values aligned, and where are there maybe some conflicts or some tensions, and how would you deal with that? And as you read around, you'll find other examples. You might find some examples that there have been some quite well-known examples of this that have led to, well, there's actually some examples that have led to court hearings and so on. So you could actually really fill this question out. I think it's a great question to really prompt your thinking and to get you to dig a bit deeper into what do we mean by values and ethics. So take your question, break it down, use the highlighter pen to understand really what you're looking for here. And then I think I love, and you know, if you've been to other webinars, you'll know that I love the basic framework that I use for everything. And there's a whole YouTube video on why I use this and where it comes from and how important it is. But what we've got is what, why, and how. And for me, that is the most essential basic framework for social work. We always need to understand the what, the why, and the how in any situation. When we're working with a family, we need to know what's happening with this family. Why is it happening? How can I work with them to bring about improved outcomes? All the time, as a social worker, our basic thinking process should go around what, why, and how. And actually, you can use that to understand the question and to start to structure ideas. What's the question asking? Why, how? Use the what, why, how all of the time. And then Diana was going to be looking at reading and research, and I'm sure I'm not going to do this as well as Diana, but my top tips around reading and research are: make sure that you engage in a wide range of reading, as wide a range as possible. Some of the things that we've talked to you about in the webinars, I know people really like the theory cards, the reflective cards. A lot of people use the theory app or are using socialworkconnect.com. That could be a starting point for you, but that should really take you as a springboard into wider reading. The most important thing that you can do is read widely. And I would say don't just read for assignments. Whenever you're reading anything, I have like a little box where I'm quite old fashioned. I'm sure you can do this electronically, but I just have like some index cards. And if I see a really great quote that I think I could use that in different things, I jot it down in there and I make sure I'm clear where I got that from, and I put the full reference in, and I can pull those out whenever I need them. If you just read when you're writing an assignment, you'll actually also find you don't enjoy the reading as much. So read widely. When you're reading for an assignment, start early. Look at the reading list, use the reading list, extend it. I can't tell you the number of times I've marked essays and I think I can tell this person's left it till the last minute and they're just using a couple of really old books that were the only ones they could still find left in the library or something. So read widely, make sure you draw out lots of different reading. You should be able to do a lot of electronic reading now from your library. Understand the difference between primary and secondary references and read plenty of primary material. So make sure that you're reading journal articles. I would suggest, for example, read the abstract and the conclusion to make sure it's going to be very relevant for you. I know Dave has suggested doing that as well in the WhatsApp group. I think that's really helpful when you're reading journal articles. So I think there's a lot of speed reading techniques that you could use. And if you've got a copy of the book Share, if you use that, I know a lot of students do, then there is a chapter, because Share stands for Seeing, Hearing, Action, Reading and Evaluation. The reading chapter contains loads of ideas on how to speed read for assignments and how to extend your reading for assignments. So take a look at that chapter. If you have it, it will advise you on how to read and how to read well. And particularly Peter Simcock's piece in there is really helpful. And remember as well, especially at the moment, that you can extend your research much more widely than just traditional reading. Look at YouTube, look at podcasts, use those as reference material. They can be really helpful. So that's my tips on reading. I'm sure that the team are going to put other tips on reading. There'll be some books that I know you will turn to for literally every assignment that you go to. So, you know, the team will probably also be able to tell you about some of those in the chat. But that's my reading and research. But I'm now going to hand over to the top team for their top tips. And we're going to go through each person in turn. We kind of looked at who wants to talk about what. This is what we need to talk about. And we've tried to put the order that seems to work in terms of assignment writing. So I'm going to start off by going over to Becky. I'm going to ask Becky to put her mic on. I will go on mute so that you don't get any feedback. And Becky's going to talk to you about her planning.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought I would probably talk about planning because I think the way that I do it is a little bit back to front, and I'm not sure if other people do. So obviously, all of these top tips tonight are just individual to us, but this is kind of what works for me. And I start at the end. It's like flicking through the book and almost like going to the ending. But I go to my module handbook and I treat it a bit as my friend from the start. And I go straight to the recommended reading list. I try and just check off all the books that I know that I've already got, or maybe references that I've used before from journals that I think, and I kind of start from there thinking, right, okay, it's not that overwhelming. I have got some of these books and I know the content of some of those books. So then that's quite helpful to me. So yeah, so that's kind of where I start at the end, by getting all my books together, and then I just start reading before I've even put pen to paper or started typing or anything. I just start reading first and go through that reading list. Then I go to the learning outcomes and the marking grid. I'm not sure what everybody's individual kind of module handbooks look like, but in ours, we've got all our learning outcomes clearly in there with a marking grid. And to start off with, in my first year, I'm a final year now, you know, I was very much really looking at that and like, how can I get the highest score? You know, how can I, you know, do the best that I can get? If I'm really honest, the final year now, it's just about passing for me. But I do still pay attention to the marking grid, because then I can pick out what my tutors maybe are looking for, you know, what is expected and what I'm expected to learn from each module, and how I can display that I have understood, how I've understood that. So I'll pick out kind of like the keywords and the areas. Maybe there's, you know, critically analyse seems to be a keyword that's in nearly every learning outcome for every essay that I've done so far. So, you know, I'll just pick out these words, and it'll be like, generally if they're repeated a few times, I'm like, they really want me to get that in there. That's one of the aims of this essay. Then I start by doing my reference list first. So that's what I mean about back to front planning. I literally, before I've put the title in or anything, I do my reference list, because by then I've done my reading, I've got a fair, you know, I've got a good idea of, you know, what I'm going to be using, what I'm going to reference. And so I start with that reference list, because not sure about you, but referencing takes a long time. I forget how to do it nearly every essay. Siobhan's just mentioned podcast then. I've never referenced a podcast, and it never even occurred to me, but I don't actually know if I'd know how to do that. So she's gonna have to tell me about that later, because I've not done that. But referencing takes me a really long time. So I exhaust it by just putting absolutely everything in there that I can think of, because to me, then it's easier to take it out if I don't actually use it in the end, rather than finding something, putting it in, and then forgetting, you know, and then having to spend all this time to go, well, where did I get that reference from, and like add it at the end. So that's my main kind of back to front bit, because I will start off with all my references and take a long time on that. But once I've done that, it almost feels like a big chunk of the essay's done, because it's like, right, okay, I'm grounded now. I know what I've read, I know what I'm going to do, I know what I'm going to put in there, and if I choose not to use it, that's not so much of a big deal. So after I've done that, I kind of break my essays down into no more than about eight main areas, because obviously the givens are the introduction and the conclusion, and then it's filling in those chunks in the middle. So I come up with my headings that are relevant to my essay, and I actually put them in as headings, and then I'll colour code them. So a bit like Siobhan with the head, you know, using the highlighters, I will colour code them. And this is me at the weekend. So this is an example of an essay that I'm writing right now and how I started off with it. So so that's all my kind of, you know, headings in there with a different colour, just so, because to me, again, it's like the visual of breaking it down. It doesn't seem so scary to me anymore, because I'm like, okay, well, it's only like, you know, 6 main elements or 8 main elements, you know, and it doesn't bother me. But what I actually do with the colour coding, even though the heading's in a colour, I will start typing it away, but it's only when I'm happy with what I've written and I'm like, right, I'm not going to touch that anymore, that is done, that I'll then highlight it, and then I'll move on to the next bit. Because while it's not highlighted, that to me is like, well, it's still a jumble. I'm not quite happy with that sentence, so I'm not going to, you know, do that. But at the end, when it's all got its individual colour, it's like, right, that chunk's done, that's, you know, don't go back to it, don't fuss over it anymore. And then when I'm finally happy with it, obviously all I've got left to do is take off the headings, take off the colours, and I'm happy with it, and it's submitted. So I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but that's kind of the way I do it. The photo I put on here as well, because a big part of my planning is having a snack and having a drink to hand, and we won't name them because I don't want Siobhan to get in any trouble, but I do have like a little sweetie jar, and it's, my diet is bang out the window when I'm writing essays and stuff, but I like to sort of chew over stuff, because I fiddle, I'll procrastinate, I'll get up, I'll move around and stuff, and it's just, sometimes it's like, you know, you've just got to have something nearby. So I have a clean desk, but I have like a little sweetie jar and a drink to hand. So that's me. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's the way that I kind of sit down and plan my essay.
Thank you, Becky. I'm sure that's very helpful, because I've learned from that. So thank you very much for sharing that. It takes us as well, what you've just shared, straight into what Kat's going to be sharing with us, because you talked about the need for critical analysis being in there a lot, and I know Kat's going to talk to us about critical writing. So are you able to put your mic on and share with us now, Kat?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I really like that idea, actually, Becky. I wish I was still writing essays so I could start with my referencing list first, because that was the worst part, definitely. So I'm not a student at the moment. I'm newly qualified social worker. So I'm kind of talking about my experiences previously in relation to critical writing. And I found this incredibly difficult initially during my degree. And then in the second year, I really started to feel as though I had it under wraps. It's about being not just being descriptive, but taking that further and ensuring that you've got the ability to develop the argument. So just setting the background isn't enough. You need to be able to provide different points of view and then be able to relate that to a situation and kind of summarize that up at the end. So the key points that I put on here in relation to that is to consider the quality of the evidence and the argument that you've read. Identify key positive and negative aspects as you can, and then assess their relevance and usefulness to the debate. So if you've got a point that you need to make and you've got a perspective from one particular area, then you need to obviously find a perspective from a different point of view and weigh that up in relation to the point that you're trying to make, and weave that through. Move that on, Siobhan.
Oh, sorry.
So I've provided a positive example of my own essay writing. It's there on the screen now. This particular one was my end of module assignment, and these are only small paragraphs which are taken from it, so they're not going to make a lot of sense on their own because it was I think it was 5,000 words or 3,000 words, but it when I got the results back, I got 92.6%. So I feel as though by the end of my degree I was able to kind of crack this critical analysis and critical reflective writing. And so if you look at the examples that I've put on, it talks about considering a different perspective, relaying that to the situation that I was dealing with. And then I've spoken about different frameworks. So I've got the perspective of England's framework in there, comparing that to Scotland's framework, and then relating it to the situation that I was having to talk about. And building in there as well the reflection on how that's helped my practice and the families that I was working with. So it's about incorporating that all within there. I've got another paragraph here which I took as well. So again, looking at the positives, talking about what you're drawing on. So I was doing my degree through Open University, so a lot different to a lot of you guys out there, but we had different learning guides that we had to use. And so I was drawing on that information and then using a lot of wider reading as well. I think in relation to this essay, I went all the way through the alphabet, and then I think I ended on AC for the referencing. So a lot of wider reading went into this. I think actually it was about 6 or 7 A4 pages of referencing by the time I'd finished. So that's definitely a point that I would put in as well, to do that wider reading and get that argument from different perspectives and put it in. Also talking about limitations helps as well. And then just bringing on to Siobhan's point, from when we had the webinar previously, and Siobhan talks a lot about highlighting, as she said earlier, definitely going through and highlighting what's descriptive, what's critical, and what's reflective. You can go back through and you can really change the paragraphs where you've got so much description in and pull that round to ensuring that it's critical enough to meet the points that you're looking at in relation to what the essay is asking you for. So that's me.
Fabulous. Thanks for that, Kat. I can see as well that there's going to be loads of questions going on. I could see the questions going up and up and up around critical writing. So I think you've got a big job now answering some of the questions and in the chat. So thank you for that, Kat.
Thank you.
And then we're going to go on to Chris, who is going to help us think about structure of assignments. So it's over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, so as we've sort of said already, every essay needs to have an introduction and a conclusion. And there are a few kind of key points really to think about these things. Siobhan, if we could just move to the next one, that'd be fab. Thank you. So the introduction is really your opportunity to tell the person reading your essay, who is generally going to be the person who's marking it, what it is that you intend to cover. you know, typically your introduction should be about 10% of your word count. So you can divide up your words so that you know that if you've got a 2,000 word essay, you're going to have roughly 200 words for your introduction. It gives you a bit of an opportunity to really define some of the key terms in the question. So, you know, you can, if it's thinking about different topics, then go out and actually find what those definitions are for those things, and actually make sure that you get them into the introduction. And also just give your reader some signposting, some key themes of actually what you're going to talk about in more depth as you're going through, so that once you've written your essay, actually you can go back and actually make sure that your introduction does cover what you've written in the essay. I know I've read a few in the past where people have written an introduction, then they've written the essay, and then they haven't gone back and checked the introduction again. And when you go back and look at it, you'll find that actually they've talked about something completely different to what they said they were going to talk about. So it's often a really good idea just to make sure that you have covered what you said you were going to cover and you haven't gone off on a tangent. And actually, as long as what you've written is relevant, sometimes it's easier, and I know I've done this myself, it's easier to actually adjust your introduction rather than rewrite the elements of your essay. As long as you're still covering the learning points, it's a much better way of doing it, because otherwise you end up thinking, oh my God, I've gone off on this tangent and I really like what I've written, but actually it's not what I've said. And then you end up getting in a panic because you might want to throw the whole thing out and start again. Whereas actually, if you just change a few bits in your introduction, that's a much more straightforward way of dealing with the problem. So that's something I know I've done before. And when it comes to the conclusion, again, you know, your conclusion needs to be somewhere in the region of about 10% of your overall essay. So again, I kind of divide things up and I make sure that I've got enough words for each part of the essay. But your conclusion actually should be a summary of the things that you've said while you've been writing. You know, bring out your key points and just summarize them. If you're including new material and new references and things into your conclusion, then actually the person who's reading your essay is going to end up a bit confused about what you're getting at. So it's just about really making sure that you are using that final part of the essay to just really demonstrate how you've answered the question by just going back over those really key points. And as I said, for introductions, just make sure that actually your conclusion also matches what you've said in your essay. I think that's often a little bit easier because we tend to write the introduction first and the conclusion at the end. But I have known it where people have written the essay and then written both the introduction and conclusion at the end. And I think that can work as well, actually. And actually, if you've kind of come to a particular conclusion through your critical analysis while you're writing your essay, then the conclusion is just a really good place to be reiterating that. It's really nice to be able to sort of finish with quite a nice rounding sentence that brings the whole thing together. So that's me.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you for that, Chris. I think you're right about some people write the introduction at the end. I think that's certainly what I used to do as an assignment. And I think that shows why we asked at the beginning, what kind of bread do you like? Everybody likes a different kind of bread, in the same way that everybody's going to take different tips and do things differently in terms of assignment writing. So, but thank you for sharing that, Chris. That was really helpful. I like the idea of it 10% at each end as well, because I think it really gives you an idea of your words. So thank you for that. So then we're going to go on to Kulchuma, and Kulchuma is going to talk to us about proofreading. So have you got your mic on, Kulchuma?
I have, yes, thank you. Hello and good evening, everybody. So proofreading, usually can be seen as the final hurdle before submitting your assignment, but it's also the most important. It allows you to make any corrections, add any final bits of information in line with your word count, obviously. And sometimes it's a step that students will just either skim over or they'll skip it altogether. And there's so many different ways of doing it. So what I want to do before I sort of start talking about the different methods, I want to know how you do your proofreading. So Chris is just going to put up a poll for us, that's just going to ask you what is your preferred method of proofreading. So I have put the option of I don't proofread because, let's be honest, sometimes we don't want to do it and sometimes we don't do it. So it'll be nice to see how people sort of do this. Sorry, I muted myself there. So
I think it's always good, Kulchuma, to tell people how the poll is going, because most people, it looks like actually most people can see the poll because we've had 255, 56 votes now, but some people can't see it, depends on what they're watching. So can you read it out? Can you see it okay?
I can't actually see it on my screen, Siobhan.
Okay, that's fine. So I wondered about that. So I'll tell people. So what we've got is, let me see, we've had 265 votes so far, although it's going up all the time. 3% of people don't proofread. 13% of people skim through. 27% of people read it aloud, either to yourself or to someone else. Then we've got 25% do ask someone else to proofread it, to read it for them, and then a mixture of methods. But I actually can't see that bit. That seems to have gone. But I imagine that the rest of the people are saying they use a mixture of methods. I'm really surprised that 3% of people don't proofread their assignment at all. I think that's really fascinating. The thing is, I proofread my work so many times, but then when I come back to it, like, I still see things that were wrong with it. I don't know if that's you as well, Kulchuma. So there we go. 30% of people use a mixture of methods. Definitely. That's just come up on my screen. So 30% use a mixture. So
definitely. So it was quite surprising that, there was actually 3% that don't. So that's why I wanted to do that poll, just to sort of find out how people actually do this. So if we go on to the next slide, it'll show you sort of the way that I like to do things and how I like to proofread. So this is not a paid promotion, and there are probably other websites that do this as well, but I prefer Grammarly, and I like to use this to sort of go through my words, and especially if I'm sort of over my word count, it sort of helps me to sort of shrink down my word count as well, and helps me to make sure that what I've written does actually make sense in the way that I've written it. I read aloud to my husband. Although when I first asked him, he was like, I don't know the first thing about social work. How is this going to help me? So I explained to him that if he listens to me, it gives me someone to read to, and then he can tell me if it flows well, if it makes sense, and then what he learned from it. And then if he's actually understood what I've written, it means that I've conveyed the message that I wanted to, and that it's come across in a tangible way, and it's not aimed too high or aimed too low either, because obviously you don't want to make it too easy to read, but you don't want it so that it sounds, you've had it written professionally either. So that's why I get my husband to read it to me. And then I read the assignment to myself again. And most importantly, I like to take breaks in between each proofread session, because it's always good to come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes, because if you're constantly reading the same document, your brain just starts to autocorrect it in a sort of way. So if you come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes, you'll pick out different things. So it's always good to have that. And in terms of referencing, I like to print it out. I print out my reference list. And then as I'm reading my assignment, so in my in-text citation, whenever I come across somebody that I've referenced, I'll go and make sure that they're actually on my reference list, because it has been done, and I've done it before, where I've actually put somebody in as an in-text citation, but completely forgotten them off my reference list. And that can, just double checking something like that can usually stop you from doing stuff like this and get you that extra mark as well. And then before submitting my assignment, I like to read it again, just for good luck, at least an hour before the deadline, just so that if there's any final tweaks that I want to make, I've got enough time to do that. So that's how I do it, but obviously it's not necessarily going to work for yourself. And this has taken me 3 years to find what works for me. So it's all about trial and error. So don't be disheartened if you try something and it doesn't work for you. Something will click for you. Just keep going at it. And then finally, technology. We've come across, technology has improved so much, but unfortunately they haven't yet developed that proofread button, which I wish somebody would. And as I said, you know, take a break in between your proofreading sessions, and to also choose the time that you're most alert. If you're tired, you're not going to pick out silly mistakes that you've made. It might be that you've repeated a word, or that you've spelt it wrong or used the wrong word. So, you know, like there, and there, you might have just used the wrong one and it's not picked it up in spell check. So always choose a time when you're alert. Read aloud or have your computer do it to you. I like my computer to read it out to me. So the way I do it is I read it to my husband, I read it myself, I get my laptop to read it to me, and then I read it again. So I proofread it at least 4 times minimum. Another top tip is don't solely rely on spell check, because it doesn't pick everything up. Like I said, it won't, if you've typed in the wrong there, it won't highlight that it's the wrong there all the time, and you'll lose marks for something so simple like that. Also, by altering the font and the size on your computer to make it more easier for you to read really helps as well, especially if you've got a specific learning disability like I have. I've got dyslexia, so I find that if I alter the font and the size to something that I can read and the spacing, it really helps me to read it clearly as well. But then obviously you've got to make sure that you revert it back to how your university wants it submitted. Also, if you've got dyslexia, or if you rely on having coloured paper rather than printing it all out on the coloured paper to proofread, you can actually change the colour of your paper on your laptop or on your PC. All you've got to do is go to design and change page colour, and that really helps as well. And it's a really good tip to know, because it's not something that everybody's aware of, so I just thought I'd share that on here as well. And the most important tip that I can give is to proofread more than once, because just reading it once or skimming it, you do miss things. Come back to it again and again, and especially when I've finished my assignment, usually I finish on the night, I'll have a good sleep, and then I'll wake up in the morning and then I will read it again. So even if there's mistakes, I'll leave it on the night and then I will come back and fix them in the morning, where I'm nice and fresh and I've had a good night's sleep because I know I've completed my assignment. So that's me done, Siobhan.
I love that, Kultrima. I love the idea your husband's learning all about social work as a kind of sideline. And then I also love, I proofread it just for good luck. I love the way he said, just proofread it for good luck. It just really tickled me, that did. So thank you very much for sharing your hints and tips for proofreading. So now we're going to go over to Di, who is going to tell us all about her top tips for referencing. Is your mic okay, Di? I know we can't get your camera working, but is your mic okay?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd share some basic information around the referencing, and I think it's really, really important that you understand what the university expects from you. Check out what their reference guide is, because some universities might use Harvard, but they put their own personal little tweak to it. So for me, it's CU Harvard, which was totally different to Harvard that I used previously, and it caught me out on sort of my first assignment. I noticed the error, but you know, I think university will give you a guide, really sort of know what you're working towards. I think in-text referencing is really important, and I've given some examples. Now these are CU Harvard, but I just think it's really important that you understand how to reference within text. So for me, an example is being, it is stated that, and then my reference is going to be at the end if I put Jones 2020 and the page number. Another way of doing it might be Jones put the year, the date, state that, and also if you're summarising something, you can actually just do your summary and take out any page number. I appreciate that might be a little bit different to how your university reference, but it's just getting that idea about being consistent within your text of how you reference. So there is that thing is tutors and markers are a bit more, maybe not lenient, but if you consistently make the same one sort of single mistake, then that's more accepted. If you consistently make different mistakes all the way through, that's going to lose you more marks. I think it's really, really important to learn that. Moving on about, I'll just put this little bit about whether it's a bibliography or a reference list. Whatever you read, the university will only want what you've cited in your assignment to go within your reference list. So it's not that I read 20 books, I'm going to list them all on a reference, but I only quoted 2 of them within my assignment. So it's very much about being aware it's not a bibliography that the university want. They want that reference list of what you've done. So if we move on to the next one, you can see that my work here has all been covered by everybody else. Becky, we are so similar in how we actually do our sort of reference when we do it. And I literally start when I'm doing my reading. So I'm gathering all my reading, I've got a Word document, I've not even started my assignment, and I literally start with this bibliography. If I think it's interesting, if I think it's relevant, if I've made notes and it's going to fit in with what I'm writing about, I just literally start that list. Again, I think Jimmy, you've said this as well, Becky said it. When I finish my assignment, I will literally go through and highlight all my in-text references, and I'm going to check that they're in that bibliography, and then I'll remove everything that I've not used. So I'm left at the end of it with this lovely reference list, and that I only sort of need to tidy up. And sort of tidying up a reference list, I think it's really important that you just sort of think about where your full stops are, your commas, etc. Is italics. It keeps it all tidy and sort of consistent. So I've put there, I think it actually avoids that sort of soul-destroying task of completing that reference list when you're quite emotional. You put so much effort into your assignment. If you've then got to start this whole reference list, that's just, it's destroying, isn't it? So I just like the idea, it's all there. And I actually find it, nobody else uses a strange word to use, but I find it really therapeutic at the end of this assignment. So you've gone through, you've done all these other things that everybody said, you're planning, etc., you're proofreading, and I just find it really therapeutic because I'm not starting from the beginning. It's just going through, tidying it all up, tweaking it with those commas, sort of like I say, the italics and that, and it gives me closure. It actually gives me real good closure on an assignment, but it hasn't been stressful because I started it at the beginning and I'm not trying to find it all. I'm literally just removing what I haven't used. So that was from me. That was, like I said, a lot of it's already been covered, so I'm not going to sort of go over the same thing again, but they were sort of my tips about referencing.
Thanks, Di. The fact that some of it's already been covered, though, I think shows this must be a really good tip if so many of you are doing it, and so many of you are getting really good marks from doing it. And it's definitely something, it's a message I'm going to take. I've never done my referencing at the start before when I'm writing something. I'm definitely going to try to do that because it's working for so many of you. So thank you for that. And then let's go now to Nicola, who is going to talk to us about her own experiences of assignment writing. So have you got your microphone on, Nicola?
I do now. If you can hear me, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So hi everyone. I'm listening to everyone's description and I'm just thinking, I wish my brain was so linear, but it really doesn't work like that for me. So I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic, which basically I describe as my brain being creatively wired. Dyspraxia affects my planning and focus, and so does dyslexia. So I find that I know what I want to say, but it feels like I can't get it out. So a lot of my essay writing is really front loaded. And so there's so much in the preparation, and you'll even find when I talk I'll stumble because it's the same thing, my brain is in overdrive. So if I am on the procrastination vacation, I literally am standing in the middle of the island and I am about to go on a vacation excursion, and every single thing that I see is going to distract me first, and then I've got to try and put that into some sort of order. And the only way I describe it is it's a mind map. And so for me, I think my warning is I feel anxiety, and I realize as I was going through the course, that actually the anxiety is more about preparation for me. And so there were so many things I had to accept. There were so many things that I had to do before I started an essay, and accept that I had to do those in order to get it started. And what I also found was, coming towards the end, once I had done all that preparation, writing the essay became easier because I had ticked off all those things that I needed to do. So I do use mind mapping tools as well, but it really wasn't as linear for me. So Siobhan, if you move on to the next slide, this is what I had in my mind. It was, you know, this is what it was studying was supposed to look like, even when I did my psychology degree, but actually that wasn't my experience. And I had to let go of that ideal in my head. This is actually what essay writing looks like for me. If I did it on paper, it would look something like what you can see, I guess, is on your left, which is me writing, and just I had to keep thinking about, if it's 3,000 words and I'm going to break it down to 500, I couldn't just start off with my introduction. I would probably go back to do that because I needed to see if it actually flowed. My environment mattered, so the temperature in the house, where I was sitting, the time of day mattered. Staying hydrated, non-alcoholic, but hydrated and fed was important. Sugar was important. I even found, when I was really struggling, that if I put one song on repeat, because of the pattern, I was able to write easier. Or I have certain playlists that I have to listen to in order to get work done. So I was talking to my son just before this, and he was like, you know, it's classical. And then he was like, actually, you might have one song on repeat. That's when I know you're struggling with what you're writing. So you kind of have to get creative with what you do and pace yourself. I think the only perfect way to write an essay for me as a dyslexic and dyspraxic was to figure out what worked best for me. I'd listen to my classmates and they'd be going, you know, I've sat down and I've wrote 500 words and I've done this and that. And I think, nah, that wasn't me, I'm afraid. So I had to get creative, and some of the things I had to do was, like you can see on the left on the computer, was highlight certain things. Highlight when we get the criteria, and sometimes I think when lecturers or whatever are writing criteria, they may just write what they want, but in between that might have been the criteria, the question, and some additional information. At times I had to get rid of the fluffy stuff and actually put on another page exactly what the question was. Siobhan, you can move on. So I had to create templates. I'm good on the computer, but if you need to write them, it's just as useful. I had to map out what I was going to do in terms of my portfolio and my assignments month by month, so that I could figure out where that was going to be. It did take time, but actually towards the end it saved me time. Also, it wasn't that panic when people were saying, oh, I've done this and I've done that, and I'm kind of like, I don't know what I've done. Then I'd look at my table and I knew that I'd done it. With the article organizer, if I read something, I would write it in there and maybe even look for quotes that I might want to use. And then I'd find that maybe for another essay, I'd still have that record. And it was really, really helpful. I wrote down a grading system and things that I needed to remember to do before I actually started writing the assignment. So that system, I think on there, I'm going to lean in, guys, so don't be alarmed, was sort of listen to Speechify, which was listen to some of the quotes that were read back to me. It was to write answers on the guidance page. As you can see, I said even listening to music over and over again and being specific in my drafts. I think what I found as being dyslexic and dyspraxic was that I struggled to be specific. And so I'll describe and I'll explain and I'll describe and I'll explain, because that's what you spend your life doing, because you're trying to get people to understand what's up there. And literally that's the description for me. It all feels like it's here, but I just can't get it out as evenly as everyone else. So the flow, there's nothing linear for me. It always just feels like it's happening like that. And so one of the things that I was taught was to use different pages to write different sections. So I might have my introduction on one page, I might have my body on another page, also my conclusion on another page, so that I could focus what I was writing instead of trying to write it all in one document. the templates are really good, and they really helped me. Siobhan, what have I got next? And so some of the things I wrote down how I would focus my answers. So how I wrote best, I wasn't linear, it was definitely mind mapping, and then I was able to tick off, had I covered that, had I actually said it. Reading and referencing, how would I remember? I used my table, and I used a, I think I put it in the chat, another sort of place where I was able to store what I read and wrote. Planning, I used apps, and on my phone I actually have organized boxes of stuff. If you have iPhone or whatever phone you use, sorry Siobhan, we were not promoting anything, but if you can put your apps into one place, then I was able to, so if I had all my stuff saved on, say for instance a drive, I could go onto that on my phone and add to my essay at the middle of the night. I could add things, but all together. So everything, my voice notes, I'd check synonyms, so I'd use a basic word and then I'd go back and use a better word. But my phone is organized so that there's actually a study section where I can get to everything I need to do my studying. The criteria, create a copy. I had to create a copy and then take out all the fancy stuff and just have the question. So I had the criteria, but I also had to separate it so I could focus on what the question was, on what they were asking, and then think about 10% needs to say this and 20% needs to say that and this percent needs to say grammar. Plot criteria responses, like I said, I took out all the extra stuff, and I'd reword it, and sometimes I'd make a statement, and particularly at the beginning, really answer the question, and then I used to say I'd put some meat on it and fluff it up, and that's basically what I do. I'd then expand on it. So I would bullet point at times what I knew I wanted to say, because I'm great at bullet pointing, but when it was time to expand on that, that's when I got stuck. And so then I'd think about quotes and think about what I'm trying to say and comparisons and that sort of thing. Preparation really helped me reduce my anxiety, and it really helped me to stay ahead. So I had to be, as a dyslexic and dyspraxic, I just had to be super organized. And the outcomes for me really that benefited were just good writing habits. Depending on what I wrote, depending on what it was, I would ask my peers, is this what the question said? I'd ask my lecturers, can I check my understanding? Is this what you're asking? And although it seems like the most basic question, often we don't want to ask it. Actually, I needed to, because I could write a whole essay about something completely different, and it just wasn't my fault. It didn't matter how many times I read it, in my head it said what it said, and it was going to stick to what it said. And so I think it's really important to ask someone, what do you understand by the question? But I would stick to the lecturers, because with students, they have their own interpretation as well. So then you could also get lost in that sort of white noise. And I think what else? 9 times out of 10, I didn't start with the introduction first. I'll be honest, I really didn't. And then just keep calm and be your own writing expert. I really had to just create my own style. I had to mute chats when they were discussing essays. I'd put a star on things that, you know, my colleagues or peers said were important, and then go back and check it once I was writing mine. But I really couldn't listen to what everyone else was saying, because then I really would be not just on that island. I think I'd just be floating around the island on a rubber dinghy. It was not helpful to me at all sharing with my peers. But then once I'd written it and realized that I understood what I was talking about, then it was helpful to me. So do separate yourself if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay to be creative. And I think my time is up.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nicola. It was fabulous. And I think what you brought was to show, actually, we all do it differently. And if it works for us, it works for us. But the thing is, you have to find what works for you. And I think what you've really shown there, Nicola, is how much thought you put into your own learning style and how to do that. So I think that was really fabulous. I'm sure people are going to be saying, oh, can I see your templates? You know, so in the chat, I know you'll be busy in the chat now. And we're going to carry on talking about specific learning needs, aren't we now, with Kelly. So Kelly, have you got your mic on now?
I do, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for that, Nicola. That was absolutely fantastic, and I am definitely going to be asking for your templates. So look out for my email. It'll be coming right after this webinar. You're really going to enjoy my 2 slides that I've got. You know what, I can talk a lot, and you know, few words, and one of my slides is just a picture. So learning needs. So I think a lot of what Nicola was saying was really relevant to me as well, and I would say that it you know, for me, it doesn't just start with the assignment. It is, like Nicola said, all of the preparation. And I think, you know, if you do have a specific learning difference, such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, or something like that, or you believe that if a lot of this is ringing true for you and you're thinking, I struggle with that, that's really helpful. That's the way I do it. Ask your uni for help, because, you know, they're absolutely there to help you and they should be helping you. So if you think that that is something that kind of is speaking to you, ask your uni for some support. And I just want to go back right to the beginning of the webinar, really, about that Procrastination Island that apparently we all visit, we all vacation on when we've got an assignment due. Unfortunately for me, I seem to live there. It's not somewhere where I visit. I live there, and if any of you know me personally, the amount of things I will do to get out of anything. It could be something yesterday that I really enjoyed doing yesterday. Today I don't want to do it, and I'll do absolutely anything apart from that thing. And the amount of shelves I've got to put up, or things I've got to fix, or things I've got to create, or projects that I'm doing at any one time is ridiculous. So for me, it's kind of really making myself focus, and it's the distraction. So seeing as we're talking about specific learning differences, my kind of first point is to get to know your own learning needs. Like Nicola said, get to know what works for you. And for me, my learning need is dyscalculia, and it's the one that nobody has ever heard of. And then when people kind of do hear of it, they go, oh, it means you can't count. And it doesn't mean you can't count. Like having dyslexia doesn't mean you can't read. Having dyscalculia doesn't mean you can't count. So, but it does have a lot in common with dyslexia. So the bits that it has in common with it are kind of working memory, sequencing, structuring, that kind of thing. There's a massive overlap in a lot of the specific learning differences where, you know, there's a lot of things that people struggle with that are the same things. So I do have issues with numbers, but it is more to do with sequencing and things like that. So I would say get to know what it means, because you're probably going to spend a lot of your life explaining to people, no, it doesn't mean I can't read. Of course I can read. Of course I can count. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that, you know, your brain is working in a slightly different way. So I would say kind of get to know yourself. Sometimes you might need to persevere, and you might need to you know, well, you definitely need to become the expert in your own learning needs, but you definitely need to persevere, because people often don't understand, and you have to educate them on what it means for you. And I would say start building your support network. So find people who you study with that are in a similar situation to you. So unfortunately for me, I don't know anybody else who has dyscalculia. I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't think there is anybody. Obviously there are people in the world, but not on my course. But I do have quite a close friend who's dyslexic, and the things that are my strengths she struggles with, and the things that she, you know, that are her strengths, the things I struggle with, but then we have got that kind of common ground. So find somebody who kind of struggles with similar things that you do, so you can be creative together, or find somebody who's really good at, you know, what you really struggle with. And I would say that somebody who can be a critical friend, and somebody who will make you accountable. It's quite easy for me to say, yeah, I'm doing my work, yeah, I'm doing loads, and I'm not, and I can say anything I want. But somebody who is going to make you accountable, you know, whether it's reading the same article at the same time as somebody else and then meeting to discuss it, and it's quite obvious if you didn't read it. So it's kind of not anything that you'll get graded for, but I found that really helps. And I would say kind of be creative, use whatever strategies work for you. So for me, it's making most of the assistive technology. And I would say that a lot of people have put in the chat about dragon speak. I got that and I was like, I'm not going to use this in a million years, where you talk to your computer and it types. And I'll admit I have been using it, but there was something in me that thought I'm not using that. But actually it was really useful. And I would say kind of get yourself some cheat sheets. So when a lot of you have been talking about referencing, I did say I get easily distracted, but this wasn't me getting distracted. I kept turning round and looking at my notice board and I thought, oh, yep, there's my referencing guide. There's my how to structure an essay guide. So have them all to hand, because if it feels like you're learning something every time you do it, it's going to slow you down. And then for me, time management becomes an issue, which is a feature of dyscalculia. So this is my last slide, and this is how I plan an assignment. So it's quite similar to what a lot of you have said, but basically what it is it's post-its on a wall, and I will take each section and kind of like a lot of you have been saying and I've seen in the chat, write different sections at each time, but sometimes that feels like a little bit too much pressure. So I'll write bullet points on post-its, and then I will put them, look at the assignment title and put them where I think they should go. And because they're on post-its, it's quite easy to move them up or move them down and think, well, it doesn't make sense for me to be talking about that there because that's linked to that, and that really doesn't flow. So I'll put them on post-its and move them up and down until I've got the order right. And you can just about see that I've got the intro, then I'm talking about language, then I'm talking about something else. And then the ones that are sideways are the learning outcomes. So I'll see kind of if the assignment is 100% of the grade for the module, and I've got, you know, however many are there, however many learning outcomes are there. I told you I can count, I can't subitize. I don't know if there's 1 million there or however many there is there. I'll have to count them later. But if there are, say, 15 learning outcomes and the assignment is 100% of the grade, I know I need to get those learning outcomes somewhere in that assignment. So the ones that are sideways are the learning outcomes. So what I need to do is I need to go, okay, it's talking about anti-oppressive practice. Have I mentioned that? Have I mentioned it explicitly? And I need to link where that is. So that's the way I do an assignment. It's a little bit different to everybody else, but I would say find what works for you and then, you know, go for that. And that's me done.
Thank you so much for that, Kelly. That was great. We're going to move quickly on now to actually, when we were talking about putting this together, and Ngozi said, well, my tutor has been really good and has really helped me with assignment writing. So we said, well, let's invite your tutor. So we did. And so we've been joined tonight by Maggie, who will take us through, from a tutor's perspective, things to think about in your assignment writing. So is your mic on okay, Maggie? Fabulous.
And I'll just start by saying that I don't think I have anything at all to add. So I'll just go through what I've said. The first, oh, okay. So there's a message coming up, something about what the host had done. No, can we go to that next slide? Thank you. Right, so the first thing I would say is the worst thing about writing an essay is a blank page. Just do it, write rubbish. Get something on paper, because the thing is, particularly nowadays, you can go back and rewrite it. You need some ideas in your head, but don't try to make it perfect. Just start it to get into something. Lots of you have spoken about going back and rewriting the introduction, but realistically, just get something down, because the more you try to get it right, it will never be perfect. You will never get it right in your head. Write the words, then you can go back and read it. So just do it, basically. I know that doesn't help with the procrastination, but actually allow yourself to write rubbish. Know it's going to be rubbish. It might not be, but if you don't do it, you won't know. Next slide. This sounds like the Prime Minister, doesn't it? So, and everyone's mentioned about reading your work. I would say it's not about reading it particularly at the end. It's not about proofreading, but keep reading it as you're going along, because it will help you understand what it is you've been saying. So you start writing it, finish for the day, okay, read it if you want to then, but maybe not. Go back the next day before you pick it up again and read what you've written. Does it make sense? Also, that will avoid repetition of the same idea. And sometimes, as Nick, no, it wasn't Nicholas, it was Kelly that was saying about the structuring. It will help you actually say, oh, right, so now I need to go on to this. Okay, so it really, really matters that you force yourself to read it, however scary that is. And it is scary reading your work because you think you've written something that was okay. None of us writes deliberately badly, but sometimes when you go back, you think, oh my goodness, what on earth was I writing there? Or, oh no, that's fine. Yes, what I need to do now is this. But force yourself to read it. No one dies from reading their work. You know, the worst thing that can happen is you're embarrassed by it, but hopefully nobody's seen it at that point. So let's go on to the next slide. This is what Kelly was saying. Look where the ideas change within a block of writing. Do you need a new paragraph? If you have to use subheadings to help you keep on track, use them. Some people don't mind being left in, other people say, oh no, you've got to take them out. It doesn't matter if they help you make sense of it. And also, I personally prefer to leave the subheadings in because actually they lead the reader through your logical flow. And it really matters that actually you're not just telling us everything in a mass, but you're actually saying, right, first of all, you need to know this, then we go on to this. But we don't always write that way. So fortunately, cut and paste nowadays is much simpler than it used to be, where it was literally cut and paste. But look, that's what you're looking for when you're reading. Does this follow from this? Next slide. Imagine you are the reader, which you will be one time, but the thing is, your audience doesn't know what's in your head. So when you're reading it, you know what you meant. But when you're reading it back, think, would somebody who doesn't know understand what I'm talking about? That doesn't mean putting in loads and loads of description and additional explanations, but sometimes you think, oh, well, that's obvious. But somebody else will say, what do you mean by that? So you have to try and get in your head the idea that the audience needs some guidance, and you need to be doing that in your essay. Tell us, going back to what Siobhan said about, okay, what, but why? Why does it matter? And sometimes that's the bits that are missing. Why does this actually matter? Not just that. It's not enough to say, this is the case, and then, wow, isn't that important? It's like, no, so why does that matter? Or how does that apply here? And that's what you're going to be doing to actually improve your essays. And your report writing as well, for that matter. Next slide. Oh yeah, this is you need to read before you start writing. That doesn't mean you keep everything in your head. And I know a lot of people have said they've got the references, so they've done the reading. But one of the things is that sometimes, and I think that's a really good plan, to avoid plagiarism by accident, don't have the books at the side of you as you're typing. You need enough of the idea in your head. This is why you just start writing, to actually explain in your words what you mean. That doesn't mean to say not occasionally go and have a look for a quotation if that's right, or look for a page number. But sometimes, if it's a good book, it's written so well, you can't improve on it, and it's hard to get their words out of your head. So try to get to a state where when you begin writing, you know more or less what you're going to do before you're doing it, without going specifically to the text that the text that you're using. There is nothing worse than discovering, we use Turnitin, there's nothing worse than discovering that accidentally you have failed an essay because you've actually plagiarized. And it isn't enough to put it in quotations or to cite it. When there's huge chunks that are not your words, it leaps out. So try to be brave. The words that are yours are better than somebody else's when it's, you know, if they're just bunged in. Okay, we're on to the next one. Okay, so check you know how to reference in the text. take care with, people have said this, the placement of brackets and full stops. So they're tiny little things, but these are going to make differences around the margins of the grades. If, you know, the brackets and full stops, I mean about when you put somebody's name and the date, whether it's got page numbers, where does the full stop come? It comes after the bracket, not before the bracket, but you have to check your own system. Think about the verb use after et al. So if you've got more than one author and you've used et al, just think, does the verb agree with it? It's a tiny little thing, but if you say Smith says, but Smith et al say, it's tiny, but it begins to show that you know what you're talking about, you're in charge here, and you're confident. And those are things to go back and proofread for as well, right? When you're thinking about it. Oh, I've said use of author's initials in the text. Don't. That's because that's our system. But usually it's just the author's surname within the text. So unless you've got a very, very unusual referencing system, there's no, you're not saying Smith P or Smith Philip or whatever in the text. Again, tiny points, but they start to make you look better by keeping these bits tidy. And somebody's already said that quotations need page numbers. That's going to be my epitaph, okay? And then other tiny little things, really pernickety things, but when we're writing, we don't write abbreviations. We don't put don't in academic work. Isn't, wouldn't. Then whatever the other one is, there's somebody chatting over it, but I can't see what the bottom one is. But they always are written in full. Okay, it's pernickety, it's picky, but again, that's the convention. And to some extent, you're joining an academic club, so you just have to know what the rules are, and that will get you, you know, from if you're in the bottom band, that's how you get into the next band. We've got another slide. Apostrophes and commas. Check for those when you're using them. Apostrophes, I know they're fussy, but they denote belonging. Okay, they're not for plurals. Be very, very careful of that. This is finer stuff, and also commas are not, sometimes people sprinkle them in their writing as if they're like salt and pepper, but they actually help us with where the pauses come. So if you're reading your work aloud, you will sense where the comma ought to be. So don't think just because you've got a long sentence, I would say avoid very long sentences, but try and actually just think, where is the natural breath here? And then put the comma in. So again, thinking about that, but also the more you read other people's work, you will become more confident in punctuation in your own work. Another slide. I've got, right, reference in text. Oh, this is just a tiny little thing. If you put a quotation in a text, if it begins, if you say, again, Smith, who is obviously very famous, Smith 2021, suggests that I always start my essays with after I've had a cup of tea in the morning. His sentence might have begun the beginning of a sentence with a capital I. Actually, that's a bad example because I has to have a capital. Right, so I'll give you another example. I hadn't written an example down. Smith suggests the art of writing is to, right, so we have our quotation in the middle of our sentence, but the convention is that the that began his sentence, which would be a capital or a uppercase, needs to be changed by you into a lowercase to weave into your sentence. So you don't, and it's a tiny thing, but it's like one of those things, instead of getting a comment, this should be a lowercase letter, it just makes it look as if it's a natural flow. So you have a look at how you're including quotations into your own sentences. Sometimes you can use them and you do them separately as if to illustrate what you've said above. But actually, if you can weave them into your work, it shows a level of understanding that has actually used somebody else's work to enhance your work rather than for them to be sort of like at the side of what you've said. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Hopefully it does. And the final one is read your work carefully. Everybody's said it. That's the key, and that's it.
Thank you so much for that, Maggie. That was great. I tell you what I think is also really helpful there is some of those things, especially the things you're talking about, grammar and convention, aren't just about assignment writing. They are, as you said, about report writing. And I know lots of managers will be commenting on that in report writing, and judges comment on it in report writing. And it is about learning how to write at the academic level that we would expect a professional social worker to write at. So I do think some of those points we need to draw out, not just from assignment writing. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for agreeing to come with us as well. And so we'll go to Ngozi now, who invited Maggie along because Ngozi had found Maggie's help so useful in her assignments. And Ngozi's going to summarise for us how she likes to write an essay, and then we will have our final summary of the session and our big announcement. So Ngozi, it's over to you.
Yeah, so in summary, all you have to do, having seen all of these tips tonight, is read and write. And I've given that with the acronyms here. So read. Read the essay, the title, because the title is what is driving you, what will take you to where you're going. Ask yourself, what is it I need to do? What is the question in this essay? What am I expected to do? And for me, I use this button of what, so what, and now what. So what is it? So what am I going to do? And if I know what I'm going to do, now what do I do? So I use that, your structure, you get the structure of your essay, you know, your title, your introduction. I know some people say they put it at last or somewhere in between or anywhere, but introduction must be there in your essay. And then you have your body, depending on how many sections or subheadings you want to do, your essay, you have your conclusion, and of course, reference it, because it's not your original work. You have to have copied from someone or have a reference point to get your essay. And that's my S for so, read. And the O is order, very important. Order your work, organize it. You have to organize all that you need, all the materials that you need for your essay. And then when you've done that, you need to read, because you're gonna read to get your sources to support your points. Read books, journals, articles, everything, anything that will give you the answer to that question that you already know and you're looking for an answer. Examine every keyword, examine it and elucidate for clarity. Then assess yourself. Do I have all the resources? My time management, what is the deadline for this essay or report? So time frame is very important. And then you draw your conclusions. You can't just finish in a vacuum. You have to draw your conclusions. Okay, I've got everything that I need to read and write. And now what? What am I going to write? Work your way through. Make sure there's a flow. There's a link. Link your ideas. Let your reader know what you're going to do next. Link the paragraph. Don't just jump into it. So use just a sentence or something to link your ideas, and then revise. Read your work. Check your ideas are flowing and that you are making sense. You can write a load of rubbish from the beginning, but to make it a written essay, you need to, make sure it flows. So you need to revise it, investigate your referencing style. Again, your university's referencing style is very important, and be careful. Beware of plagiarism. If you have plagiarism check on your university system, then you do that to make sure that you are not plagiarizing. And then time management, do not procrastinate. That's been said a lot, so you know what that means. So you do bear in mind the deadline for the submission, and the end of it, evaluate proofread, check your spelling, citations, referencing, and be sure you have a good ending. And then that's how you get the answer to how do I write an essay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngozi. That was fabulous. I love the way you put that together around read and write as well. Was fabulous. And we're going to just very quickly summarize now using a similar way that Ngozi has used, where, as Chris said, never put anything in your conclusion that you haven't already said. So there's nothing here we haven't already said, but answer the question. Address the learning outcomes, think about the structure that you're using, stick to the referencing rules, know them and stick to them. Think about your introductions and conclusions because they are important. Get the balance right in terms of your critical thinking. Make sure you've got the balance in there. You need to keep within the word count. Make sure to proofread several times, as Kultuma suggested to you. Ensure relevance. Everything that you're putting in there, ensure it's relevance to the question. Never leave it until the last minute to write your assignment timetable, your plan. How am I going to put this in? And then your assignments can be submitted with confidence. That's what we think together in the Social Work Student Connect team. That is our top tip for putting together assignments. But we are going to have our poet on the team, who always delights us with a poem, going to give us a bit of a poem about what it feels like to write an essay as a social work student. So it's over to you, Dave, if you can put your microphone on.
Sorry, my screen blacked out. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. So yeah. Pain, sweat, doubt to yes, started to write when it's due within minutes. Tears upon self-ultimatums with yes you cans from all around, but you only hear the crinkles of your deprecating frown. It's okay. I promise you're not left alone, even though others may seem to sit upon polished thrones, champions, studious knights with paper-made crowns. They too have felt what pain you have suffered. And you're shining a light in this trying time, letting them know that they're not alone too, that you, though in pain and struggling, will help them muddle through. Before we know it, the essays are done, and we've either passed or not, but no one has run. Always set to try and try again and again. That's all we can ask, is that we don't give up. We will face so many challenges after, both good and the bad. So please don't feel bad that instead of reading Carl Rogers, you went for a bath.
Thank you so much, Dave. We always love your poems, and it's fabulous that we can do that when we are concluding a session. But please don't go yet. Everybody who's here, you know that we normally end off by telling you about the sessions that we've got to come. And I think the team will be putting the links into the chat. Next week, we're going to be joined by Ben Ashcroft, going to be talking to us about care to care. So we've got a few sessions coming up which are about practice issues. Jenny Simpson's going to be joining us to talk about owning your placement experience. We're going to return to the topic of moral injury, and then we've got some more back to basics sessions coming up for you around theory and practice and putting those into your assignments and portfolios. So that's what we've got coming up. But we do have big news, because as well as all of the conversations we have in our WhatsApp group about essay writing, we've also been having conversations about the fact that the pandemic has impacted so much on all of your experience as students. And we see you, we hear you. We've tried to do these webinars for you to help you keep connected during this, but we know that many of you are going to be missing out on your graduation. So we are going to be putting together an event. It will be a huge event for social work graduates all over the world to join together for a huge virtual graduation on the 23rd of June. And it's very special for the class of 2020 and 2021 who haven't had a graduation because of the pandemic. We're going to be doing some incredibly exciting things. I know that you will all want to be involved, that you will want to be included in the yearbook of social work students who are graduating in the middle of a global pandemic. We want, as a team, to give back to you, and that event is going to be a huge night, and we're planning it already. We've got some fabulous things going on. We are opening up registration for that event tonight. So the team are going to put the link in there, and we will now be letting people know on our social media. So please do join us for that event. It's going to be a very special event from 7 till 9 p.m. on the 23rd of June. And thank you so much for all joining us tonight for our top tips on writing assignments with the Student Connect team. I'm so proud of the team and what they've pulled together based on the idea that they were giving each other hints and tips about how to write essays in the WhatsApp group, and we said, look, let's do a webinar on that. And I think the team have done an absolutely fabulous job. Thank you also to Maggie, who came along at Ngosi's request. We really appreciate you giving up your evening to spend with us tonight. Thank you so much for that. And so thank you to everybody. As normal, Di and Kultuma will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody who was here. We'll try and answer any questions that we didn't manage to get through to, and we'll also be sending you out your certificate for attending. And hopefully we'll see lots of you next week. Good night, everybody. Bye.